The day before I made the pâté my duck suite was chopped with. It was just ground veal and pork mixed with chopped up pork fat, onions that had been minced and sautéed in butter, and Madeira that had been cooked down in the same pan. Some eggs, salt, pepper, allspice, thyme, a clove of crushed garlic. Hardly worth mentioning at this late stage in the game. This stuff I mounded up into the duck suite, lying splayed across the cutting board. After that, it was just a matter of sewing it up. When I'd gone out to buy my glittering, deadly Japanese boning knife, I'd also picked up some poultry lacers, which sounded like just the thing for lacing up poultry. Don't you think? They even came with twine included. I was a little bit concerned, though, because these poultry lacer thingies, rather than ending with eyes at their non-business ends, just curled up into a biggish loop, maybe a little more than half a dime in diameter, the tail of which did not quite meet the shaft of the needle. Actually, they looked exactly like the metal things we had scattered around our house for years, which we called skewers, and lost all the time because they were so small. And lots of times they'd slip through the bars of our dishwashing rack and fall into the sinking muck that was building up in the drip pan. And you really didn't want to use them after that. How was I supposed to sew up a duck with something like that? I'd never crocheted before, but I used to watch my Grammy do it, and I believe the maneuver I was attempting here had both similarities. I looped twine several times through the eye of the skewer, stuck the skewer or poultry lacer or whatever through 2 layers of duck skin, then pulled it all the way up through both layers of the skin, easing the skin around the open loop at the end, trying as I did so to worry the twine through the holes in both flaps of the duck skin before it slipped off the open end of the loop. This didn't work very well. In fact, it led to a renewal of obscenities, sobs, and pounding of hands on the table. But then my husband, who's not an idiot at all, had the brilliant notion. For a while, he fiddled about the possibilities of safety pins. Eric's a big fan of safety pins. He always carries one around in his wallet. He claims it's great for picking up chicks. Before coming upon the most elegantly simple solution of all, a sewing needle. A really, really big sewing needle. I couldn't imagine how he ever found it, or why we had a needle that big in the house in the first place. But I'm not looking a gift horse in the mouth. It worked like a charm, too. Too easy to even talk about, which was good, because it meant I would not have to stab my eyes out with the skewer/poultry lacer. Once the duck was sewn, I bound it tightly with links of string until it was basically football-shaped, then browned it on all sides in a skillet with oil. While it cooled, I took out the pastry dough, and lo, it had miraculously transformed from a crumbly mess into dough that I could roll out. This day was getting better and better, but seriously, for once. In no time, I had browned the duck sweet pâté football sealed inside 2 ovals of pastry. It went so easily that I was almost embarrassed. I even cut out little rounds from the leftover pastries and made fan shapes on them with the back of the knife, and used them to disguise the pinched edges of the ovals. More rounds formed a floret shaped in the middle, and the hole I poked in the crust to let steam escape. I tell you what, rather than me trying to explain all of this, go get your copy of MTAOFC and turn to page 569. See that picture? That is exactly what my pâté de canard and croûte look like. Eric, look! He came in and was duly impressed, because how could he not be? It was damned amazing. And your Julia impressions definitely improving, by the way, he said. What? When you were boning the duck. It was really good. You should take that on the road. Huh. I didn't remember saying a word. So the ending may be a long time in coming, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a way of sneaking up on you. Gwen and Sally came over to celebrate our second to last day. We stuck a DVD of Julia's greatest hits on the machine and casually watched it while we waited for the pâté de canard and croûte to cook. Eating Roquefort turnovers and drinking $65 champagne, which tasted just like regular champagne, only more expensive. It all felt very celebratory and nice. And if it seemed just a smidge anticlimactic, drinking champagne always serves as a good cure for that. I really hardly ever pick up the telephone. I thought it was just my mom this time. Julie, congratulations! It wasn't. Thanks. Finished the project, have you? No, actually, not till tomorrow. Oops. Well, congratulations in advance then. Oh, I'm sorry, my name's Nick. I'm a reporter out here in Santa Monica. And I just finished up an interview with Julia for our paper out here. I was really going to have to get my phone number unlisted. I'd like to get your thoughts on some things because I asked her about you, and frankly, she was kind of a pill about it. Is this a bad time? Oh, no, it's fine. When I hung up the phone 5 minutes later, I felt numb. Eric and Gwen were watching Julia demonstrating how to char the skin of a tomato. I stood for a moment in front of the TV watching. She looked young, but she must have been at least 70 at the time. Julia took out a blowtorch and brandished it, and Gwen laughed. The aroma of duck was beginning to seep from the kitchen. Who was that on the phone, babe? Julia hates me. I'm sorry? I sat on the couch beside Eric. Gwen and Sally were staring at me. The television forgotten. That was a reporter from California. He just interviewed Julia. He asked her about me. She hates me. I giggled, like I do in these situations, breathlessly. She thinks I'm not respectful or not serious or something. Sally made an offended noise in her throat. That's not fair. Do you think I'm not serious? Not serious? I laughed again. But this time there was a tickle in my nose, and I squinted at the beginning of a burn behind my eyes. Oh, please. Gwen held the bottle of champagne out to me, and I stopped rolling the glass I had between my palms so she could pour. Screw her. Eric put his arm over my shoulder. What is she, 90? 91, I sniffed. See, she probably doesn't even have the first idea of what a blog is. I don't understand how she could hate this. Sally sounded nearly as wounded as I felt. What's wrong with her? I don't know. Maybe she thinks I'm taking advantage, or I'm not. I was taken surprise by a sudden rush of tears. I thought I was sorry if I was, and then abruptly, I was wailing. Everyone was shocked into stillness for a fraction of a second. Then Eric was pulling me to his chest, and Gwen and Sally were fluttering down on either side of me in that ruffling feathers way of best friends. As they clucked over me, I cried open-throated, as if my heart would break, my head back so tears ran into my eyes, heaving, taking loud, rasping gulps, so I could keep going. Until after a while, it wasn't just about what Julia did or didn't think about me. And it wasn't about dough that was crumbly or aspic that didn't set or a job that didn't make me happy. And then until eventually it wasn't even about being sad. I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed until it turned into a good cry. The best cry I'd ever had, in fact. Even though this last year I've had far more than my share. Got snot all over Eric's shirt, and Sally took away my champagne glass to make sure I didn't break it. Gwen held my hand, and it felt so good that I began to laugh too, sobbing and giggling, all of it very loudly. The alarm in the kitchen started to beep, which meant that it was time to take out the pâté de canard and croûte. I'll get it. Eric left me to the girls and got up to go to the kitchen. So what did you say to the reporter? Asked Sally, as she handed me back my champagne glass, evidently taking it from the tittering amid tears that I could now be trusted with it. I lifted the glass to my lips. I said, fuck her. Crack myself up sometimes, I really do. Sally nimbly managed to avoid the champagne spew, but Gwen caught some friendly fire. No, you didn't, cried Sally. No, of course not. I should have, though. The bleeping from the kitchen had stopped. Hey, Julie? Yeah? I rolled my eyes, snuffling back into the back of my hand while Gwen dabbed at her shirt. What's wrong now? You ought to take a look at this. Gwen and Sally stared at me, and I stared back. Oh God, what is it? At that moment, Eric came out of the kitchen. He had oven mitts in his hands, and he was carrying a roasting pan before him. It was my pâté de canard à croûte, and it was perfect. Gwen squealed, and Sally clapped her hands. Eric was grinning at me. Would you look at that? I sighed. Julie, this is 75% as good as Julie could do, at least. One more sob/giggle escaped me, but I shook it off. Okay, then. I waved him back into the kitchen. Let's crack this mother open. Julia wanted me to excavate the duck, detruss it, carve it, and return it to the crust. That was simply not going to happen. What I did, while everyone watched, with their hearts in their mouths, was carve out a sort of pastry lid, move it carefully to one side, and gingerly reach in with a pair of scissors to cut any strings from around the duck so I could get to it and pull them out. After that, I put the top back on, took my biggest carving knife, the one with which I couldn't make a dent in the marrowbone most of a year ago, and just sliced right through. It did not taste unlike anything I'd ever eaten, or even better exactly. It just tasted more rich and smooth and crispy and buttery and ducky. Culinary plutonium was what it was. But what a way to go. We all sat around the dinner table, sated and burping under the fuzzy lilac chandelier Eric had gotten me for Valentine's Day, which looked like a Muppet, and which, thanks to CBS, had seen a 15 minutes of its own. Well, said Gwen, if Julie isn't happy with this, then there's just no pleasing the bitch. Forget Tartapalooza. That's the way we do it in the LIC. When Sally and Gwen looked home, and the remaining pâté de canard à croûte, now looking sad and ravaged, was bundled in plastic wrap and stuck in the fridge. Eric and I got into bed. I laid my head on his chest and hitched my leg over his thighs, and soon was doing the giggle cry thing again, only quieter. And heavier on the giggling side of things. Almost done, said Eric. Almost done. So what's for dinner tomorrow? Kidneys with beef marrow. Beef marrow. Yeah. And then, after that, Eric kissed the top of my head as I snuggled closer. Can we have a dog? And did another cry giggle. Sure. Oh, and lots of salad. Oh, yeah. And a baby. You know how I need to get started with that, Eric, because you know I got a syndrome. I know. I'm not worried. Why not? Maybe we should be worried. Nah. If you can do the project, you can do it. No problem. Maybe you're right. And so we slept. Like a pair of duck football stuffed babies. The last day of the project, I took off work. Because, like I said, what were they going to do? I thought I would spend the day serenely preparing the final meal, contemplating the meaning of the year and all the bounteous blessings that had been bestowed upon me. But you know, I've never been much good at contemplation and serenity. Like French cooking takes more than a year to master. So instead, I spent the morning in a bout of severe civil fixation. I'm just going to finish taking Rome, and then I'm stopping for sure. And then I had to rush frantically to get errands done. At Ottomanelli's, where I went for my kidneys and marrowbone, the guy behind the counter said, "Hey, how's the cooking?" With "Who's it, Julia, child?" Good. I'm done with it, actually. That's good. I'm telling ya, never saw so many people ordering awful in my life. He held up the marrowbone I had ordered. Say, you using this for enrichment? Because I can cut this in half for you to get it out. Now he tells me. Eric and I ate our rognons de veau à la bourrelaise alone together with green beans and some sautéed potatoes on a plate decorated with mayonnaise collée. That's mayonnaise you put gelatin into so that you can shape it with a pastry bag into squiggles and designs, should you have a mind. I figured I should save at least one catastrophic failure for the end. Waiting on the kitchen counter as we ate our meal was the very last recipe of MTAOFC, René de Saba, otherwise known as chocolate cake. My deadly new Japanese boning knife made cleaning the kidneys much easier. It went right after those little bits. The René de Saba went smoothly as well. This was almost a tort, really, with pulverized almonds substituting for a good proportion of the flour. The only trick to it was not to overbake it. JC said that overcooked, the cake loses its special creamy quality, and I would hate for the final bite of the year to be a cake with no special creaminess. So I was on tenterhooks, I'll admit, but all went according to plan. The mayonnaise collée, well, it's mayonnaise with gelatin mixed into it. What can you expect? I didn't make it any easier for myself either, because here I was after 365 days still confusing easy with simple. Beating mayonnaise by hand is just too Martha. I'll screw it up. I know I will. The food processor is easier. Disregarding a year's worth of evidence that I always screw up the mayonnaise when I use the food processor every single time, I dumped the eggs and mustard and salt into the bowl of the Cuisinart and buzzed it, then added the lemon juice, and just like Julia told me to add the oil, I used the cup that slides into the top of the Cuisinart, which it had taken me an embarrassing number of attempts at mayonnaise to realize had a pinprick hole in the bottom of it. That is exactly the right diameter for dispensing oil for mayonnaise. Probably, if I still had the manual for the thing, which obviously I don't, I would find that hole is in fact called the mayonnaise hole. I poured the oil in there and let it take care of the conscientious drip drop. This had worked in the past. On this day, I wound up with liquid. Damn it, I muttered. However, I heroically did not scream, fuck it, at the top of my lungs. Instead, I started again. This time, I would do it by hand. I did not have high hopes. I beat together the egg yolks and the mustard and salt. I took the cup out of the top of the Cuisinart and gave it to Eric. Hold this over the bowl and just let it drip, okay? So he stood. The oil dripped, and I whisked and whisked and whisked. And I'll be damned if it didn't work like a charm. Eric? I said, giving the last few beats to the beautiful pale yellow, perfectly thick bowl. Yes, Julie? Don't let me forget this. If I've learned nothing else, I've learned that I can make mayonnaise by hand. We can make mayonnaise by hand, he corrected, as he shook out his sore wrist with a wince. Right, we can. I stirred into the mayonnaise some gelatin that I had softened with white wine and vinegar stock. And then I set it in the fridge to set. Regones de veau a la bordelaise is simplicity itself to make, no different, essentially, from poulet sauté. And no different, especially, from beefsteak sauté Bercy. In fact, making it that night felt like falling into a time warp. I stood before the stove, melting butter and browning meat and smelling the smells of wine deglazing and shallot softening. But the dishes changed before my eyes, and I heard Julia warbling. Beef bourguignon is the same as coq au vin. You can use lamb, you can use veal, you can use pork. I retrieved the split marrow bone from the fridge, where it had been slowly thawing for some hours, just as the guy at Ottomanelli's had promised. The strip of marrow lifted easily from the bone furrow in one piece. I diced it and soaked it in hot water for a couple of minutes to soften it further, then tossed it into the sauce along with the sliced kidneys and reheated the pan until everything was warm. Julia says mayonnaise colle, that it can be squeezed out of a pastry bag to make some fancy decorations. Reading that sentence wigged me out like nothing I'd read all year. More than brains, more than cutting lobsters in half, more than even eggs in aspic. I thought of a cake iced with mayonnaise, florets, mayonnaise, curlicues, congratulations, Julie, written out in big cursive letters. 1961 was a different country, no doubt about it. I used mayonnaise colle to decorate the plate that I'd be serving the potatoes on. As you'll remember, my pastry bag had split apart on the night that Eric almost divorced me, sauce tartare. So I jimmied a makeshift one out of a Ziploc bag. With it, I made mayonnaise curlicues and mayonnaise florets. And because congratulations, Julie seemed, well, a little self-congratulatory, in mayonnaise, Julie, Julia, in cursive letters around the rim of the plate. But as it turns out, mayonnaise colle works significantly better on cold dishes. Once I scooped warm potatoes onto the plate, my fancy decoration swiftly melted into undistinguished blobs, and the letters of Julie/Julia grew fatter and more vague, and finally completely illegible. I guess I should have thought of that. No matter, mayonnaise colle, gelled or not, still tasted delicious on sautéed potatoes. The rogonos de veau à la bordelaise did not taste bad, no matter what my mother says, because I cleaned them with my deadly boning knife, and because the beef marrow conducted a two-pronged attack with a finishing sprinkle of parsley on any holdout, extinguishing it in between fatty, velvety richness and sharp, fresh greenness. We ate it with wine I bought in a city that is cloudy and dark and tastes a little like blood. The lady who sold it to me called it feral. Like me, for dessert, some creamy, smooth René de Sable and Season 1, Episode 2, Buffy. All of a sudden, that was it. For 12 months, I had been doing this thing. I had cooked for friends and family and for anchor women on CNN FN. And somewhere there in the back of it, it had gotten a little surreal. But now, here we are, back exactly where we just started. Just Eric, me, 3 cats, slightly worse for wear, sitting on a couch in the outer boroughs eating. Buffy was on the TV, and somewhere Julie was chortling, even if she did hate me. The end.